And with that gory story, we'll just pick up. We'll pick up on the meeting. Welcome everyone to October 11th. And it again, as you can see, that the first slide we wanted to share was actually a slide from PJ, and she sent it a few weeks ago from her new home in Fairbanks. And yet I was looking forward to having her comment on it here this morning. But yet we got a note from her husband saying that there's still some fluid in her knee surgery, so she's back in recovery and can't join us here this morning. And I would encourage you, send a note, send an email to PJ and to wish her well and a speedy recovery. Her husband noted that this first snowfall of the year was happening even as we speak here. So it's winter in Fairbanks.
Wow.
There you go. Okay, so here we are here this morning. A lot to do here this morning, and and so a lot to cover. I'm going to make a few comments that we'll go through our regular comments here regarding the October programs from Oregon State. We'll talk a little bit about the survey, the survey that so many of you participated in and submitted your responses to, and I've hugely appreciated that. We're going to go into more detail at the board meeting afterwards. So I would encourage folks that are really interested in a deep dive into the survey to hang on and join us for this at the board meeting later on. We'll talk about board elections for our officers that's coming up later this month. And we'll get into announcements, and then the feature, of course, today is hosting someone who has no shortage of names, as we've discussed earlier, in that prior to having people on. But Jo Ellen Meyers Sharp will share to us, what it's like to garden from 1,500 miles away. Actually, it's probably closer to 2,000 miles when I think about where you're at in Indianapolis, Jo Ellen. So this is going to be quite an interesting perspective, given that so many of us actually hail from the Midwest. Okay, a busy calendar, a lot of birthdays here. Cindy, I see you're on. Happy birthday. And Terry, Nancy, Dolores, Helen, happy birthday to you. Kathy and Joe. So again, we want to make acknowledgement of Indigenous Peoples Day that was yesterday, and make a recognition that the land that we are on here in Grays Harbor and Pacific County was the host for at least a dozen different tribes, of which several, of course, are federally recognized even at this point. Next Monday, a study group noticed from the e-news last week that the study group will be in the evening time. Midge, you have any comments that you want to share with respect to the study group, the content, the time, the program? And I thought I saw Midge on. Maybe I'm mistaken. Indeed, I am. Okay. And then at Seed Saver coming up on Sunday, the 23rd, and at the first meeting of the Greater Grays Harbor community coming up on the 22nd. And at Jude, Cindy, any commentary, any comments regarding that organizational meeting coming up next week?
Is it next week? Okay.
22nd.
22nd, yeah. Okay, yeah. Well, we're hoping everybody will show up and we'll see what we can do. So it is truly an organizational meeting, so not anything very much planned.
So that's why I really wanted to make sure we highlighted it today and spoke about it, because this is indeed the first meeting of the organization, and it actually will have implications for the overall structure of the foundation and our overall operation. So it's important that folks come and participate.
I'll be there.
Yeah, I was referring that there was an announcement in the e-news, and hopefully if anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to talk to you on the phone if you want to call me. Very good. So again, the importance of e-news, and if anyone here has not received their e-news, please alert John or myself, and we'll make sure that you're getting a copy of it, because all the news that's fit to print is there. Hey, a quick shout out as well to Angela Holly, who put together a slideshow of pictures across the entire training program from 2022. So the URL is here. I made a tiny URL so that's more memorable. So tinyurl.com at MG 2022 cohort. You'll find a slideshow here that's got some great pictures, by the way. And congratulations to all the interns that completed training and all the veterans that participated in the educational process itself. So again, a great slideshow, and congratulations to Angela. Another shout out, by the way, to a newly trained transplant
Master Gardener from South Dakota who went through the training this year, Eva, down here in Pacific County. She organized a pruning clinic at the Cranberry Museum and Gift Shop here in Long Beach. And so myself, together with Mike and Sharon, led a group of about a dozen folks that came in. And not only did we teach a lot of pruning exercises, but we can accomplish a bunch of pruning, as you can see from the detritus laid on here. Okay, October to-dos. This is a busy time, and per Oregon State.
Yeah.
Per Oregon State, and let's see, and so one of the big thing, of course, they're talking us here to do here is make sure that we definitely get the drainage problems cleared up here before the rains begin here. And then of course winter cropping. Time to get onto that. This was a big subject at the Master Gardener State Conference, the education conference, just last week. Really talking about the importance of winter cover cropping here in the state. Propagating, dig and divide rhubarb. I dug up my rhubarb a couple weeks ago, and it definitely they're very happy. And although I don't talk to my plants as much as Sabine says she's talking to her plants, I know the rhubarb are much happier, and I think they're thanking me in their own special way. October to-dos, we got a lot of pest management, of course, and of course this is the big thing that we tell all of the public that reaches us: don't treat unless a problem is identified. There's going to be a lot of pests that are going to show up here, including that we're finding it again, going back to deer and elk and moose, as we were talking about earlier. A lot of foraging going on from the wildlife mammals in the area. Interesting how that OSU is recommending moles and gopher traps. Remember that here in Washington State, that the actual clamping traps are illegal, and although I'm sure that many folks are using them. Maintenance: do not compost diseased plants unless using hot compost methods. Time to get tools cleaned and sharpened. I'll make a note that during our pruning clinic at the Cranberry Museum, lots and lots of folks showed up with tools, pruning tools and pruning equipment that were clearly long due for sharpening and for oiling. And we made sure, by the way, to sterilize all those pruning equipments, all those pruning tools before we let them loose in the landscape there at the museum. And then when we start getting into harvest here, there's been phenomenal progress and accomplishments made from each of our demo gardens and our demo beds. And I wanted to begin with the Elma demo garden. The yield there was pretty darn incredible. And I apologize, Cindy, for chopping off, it looks like the top of the slide there, but I mean, that was over nearly 300 pounds of produce to the Elma and McCleary food banks you guys produced. And I was particularly excited what you said here about the 4,500 seedlings that you shared with the food bank clients. And the picture that's in the background there is those jugs that you began with, right? To begin the seedings. Cindy, you want to share a little bit more?
Just a little bit. That's really where we got the big boost for our seedlings. Well, we did the winter seed sow activity amongst a few master gardeners with our masks on last January, when there was still a little bit of COVID and such, but we were all outside and we planted our milk jugs in generally cool crop seeds, and then covered them up and then stored them out in the compost area. And that's where a lot of those little seedlings came from. Not all of them were in great shape, but we selected the ones that were, and then just kind of overplanted. In some of the little 6-packs, we might put 12 plants in instead of 6, so that our food bank clients got plenty of plants out of that. That's where those numbers come from. So
it's very impressive. And indeed, that the idea of starting the garden from transplants was actually highlighted at the state education conference last week, and noting that, you typically, in fact, not typically, but you will regularly get much better yields if you're starting from transplants as opposed to trying to start from seeds. And then, of course, I couldn't resist this picture. This is a great shot, Cindy, of what, of some of the gourds. I mean, of course, and it's great you have the space out there to grow such gourds. But any particular secret for how, how you were so successful with your squash and your gourds?
Well, that's hilarious, Kelly, because honestly, it took forever for those darn vines to get going. and this is, this is what we see at the end of the season, but we, honestly chewing on fingernails trying to get the vines to get going, because we planted the gourds along where our bean tunnel is, because we're rotating our crops, so we don't have beans on the bean tunnel. Then we had gourds, and they just really missed the spot. If they got waist high, it was a surprise. It was a pleasant surprise. So we really didn't do that good, but we did have a lot of gourds come out of it. So.
I didn't want to miss that.
And let me go on to this next one here. This is there's the picture of the tree, and I know you had the frog. You had a number of pictures of your frogs there, and it was great. But you want to share more about what happened? The whole frog story, Sharon. Yes, Cindy.
Well, okay, the corn is always an iffy crop for us in the demonstration garden. We usually don't have that big of a patch for it, but anyways, in this particular year, we were just checking on the corn cobs to see how they were doing, and discovered that we had a heck of a lot of tree frogs hanging out in the corn patch. And that was, gosh, that must have been several weeks ago, almost a month ago. And even today, there was at least one little guy still in the corn patch. But what we think they are doing in there, and which makes good sense, is there's a male and female tree frogs are coming together. It's that time of year, but also there's a lot of pollinators or flying insects that move through the corn patch, because we have a lot of understory flowers. You can see the purple flower, the blue flower in the bottom of the page on the left hand side, and some other white flowers. So we have lots of flowers that are blooming along with the corn. So there's lots of attraction for bees and other things. And then we also there's a lot of earwigs in there too. So that's what's attracting the frogs, we think. So.
And then you tell me that this was quite the attraction for the employees of the fairgrounds, right?
Yeah, we have one lady who comes and says she talks to the frogs daily, which is hilarious. But she's also a very sweet person, so that's a good thing.
I think,
yeah, she's supportive.
Given all the discussion we had prior to the meeting here beginning about us talking to our plants and our animals, I think we have a definite, sounds like we have a definite problem here amongst them.
Yes, the problematic little critters, right?
Well, congratulations to Elma and all the work here. And then turning it over to Ocean Shores and Sushila, you sent me a bucket load of pictures of the variety of stuff you're doing out there. And of course, again, it's always phenomenal, Sushila, what you guys are doing out there in Ocean Shores, not a mile from the ocean itself. You want to share more?
Well, I have a cold, so I was going to say that we don't usually give, I think I said that in a note, we don't grow stuff for the food bank because we have specific beds that are handled by the food bank. So whatever we grow in the demo gardens, it's for educational reasons and experimentation, and and we just harvest it as we go along, and we give it to gardeners and us, the master gardeners. And we've had just a wonderful crop of tomatillos and ground cherries and peppers and basil, which, normally we can't grow that stuff unless it's in a hoop garden or inside a greenhouse, because it's just too windy. We don't have the warmth that Elma has, and maybe a couple other places. So we take what we can get. So it was fun this year, especially having the North Beach interns be involved in planting and everything. And we still have a really good crop of mustard greens and beans and stuff that is coming along, and we haven't harvested that yet. So next year we're going to tend to do something maybe a bit different, and we have quite a lot on our calendar next year at the library and the garden. So, yeah.
Well, congratulations. And again, noting that, of course, what you're doing out there with the beds that you maintain, is also inspiration for the other community beds that are right around you.
Yeah, and Kathy Sandifer and Sabine, they've been very involved. And Anna Ettencourt, she's got the pollinator bed. They've done just a fabulous job on growing whatever they decided to grow. It's beautiful. Yeah, and all the sunflowers are amazing.
Well,
So
congratulations.
yeah, thank you.
Congratulations. And then over to South Bend, Jan and Brenda, I know you're on. I mean, 272 pounds. That's pretty darn incredible, given the amount. I don't consider your garden area very large there, and you still got potatoes yet to come. You want to share more?
I don't really have much to add to that. I'm sorry. I've been sick pretty much since returning from the conference. Yeah, we need to schedule a work party to harvest potatoes. We have a lot of them, probably 20 to 40 pounds. So we did beat our totals from last year, just all of our normal crops. And so we feel like we've had a pretty successful year.
And again, the recovery that you've made for that overall, the bed and the garden area, from what it looked like a few years ago is pretty tremendous. So congratulations on the work you guys are, you're doing up there in terms of making things happen. And last but not least, down in Owaco, we grow we don't have much space down there. And of course, we grow a lot of greens that don't add up much in the weight category. But I know, Bev, that what we've been given to the food banks here have been much appreciated.
Yeah, I just want to say we're not done yet because we have hoop houses. We just pulled down the plastic last week because it's getting a little cooler as we go into the fall and winter season. And so we still have things that we've planted. The snow peas are looking really well. We planted turnips, spinach, chard, regular leaf lettuce. So I'm gonna be very hopeful in saying that by the end of this year, we'll be much more in terms of more like 70, 80, 90 pounds. And they go to 3 food banks, actually, Chinook, Ilwaco, and Ocean Park. So we've got some great volunteers here. There's 8 of us active and on the Long Beach Peninsula, and we take turns on which week we do the harvest, the watering and the harvesting. So the workload is really spread amongst all of us.
I think it's an interesting point that I think all of us are sharing, that we had a very late start to the overall year. And it, just as you noted, Cindy, just in kicking things off, is that we didn't really get going, with the plants until later in the summer when things got warmer.
Yeah, and I just want to add that, we do have a very small space that we have our raised beds on. And just in this one place in Ilwaco, which is next to the Columbia Pacific Heritage Museum, it's a wind tunnel. So we had to make some changes on how we could keep the hoops in place when you got 50 and 60 mile-an-hour winds. And so Kelly was able to put some structures in place so that I don't think that's going to happen this coming year. And if you don't realize, this is the end of our second year, so it's all experimentation at this point.
So a couple of other notes that we'll pick up into as we get into announcements here is that, again, I want to thank everyone who participated in the survey. We had about 55 responses overall to the survey from our overall membership, which is close to, it's about 65 to 70% or so of our overall membership that responded. I'm going to go through the details, and I have a number of slides that will go into the details in the board meeting that follows this meeting. But a lot of great insights here in terms of the preferences and thoughts. I'll note just in summary that, is that almost everyone who responded, I mean, literally almost everyone who responded, reported getting pretty good with Zoom over the past couple of years, as you would hope you would have. and everybody having decent broadband and access to it, and access to computer that allows a Zoom and access. Relative to preferences in terms of when we meet, people very much still want to meet monthly. They very much value coming together physically and face-to-face meetings, so that the face-to-face meeting for social interaction and for networking and for the informal contacts that face-to-face meetings allow is highly prized. Relative to a date and a time, I tell you, the majority still prefer meeting in the middle of the week, in midweek, such as we're doing here today, and meeting either in the late morning or the early afternoon. So there was not a strong push for an evening meeting and or a weekend meeting. But again, we'll share those details and we'll get into some of those insights later in the board meeting. Board elections. This is a reminder that, and I'll have a couple slides about that coming up here. The reminder that per our bylaws, October is the month at which we elect our officers for the next year. And we'll be pushing out a ballot with the candidates, to everyone here in a few days coming from now. But again, I'll have more on that later on. Alina, I wanted to turn it over to you because I know you wanted to have a couple announcements here regarding new program priorities that the WSU program will be emphasizing. I have 2 slides here with the priorities that you shared.
Unmute. Okay. So yes, Master Gardeners are going to be, before we did program categories, now we're refining it more to program priorities. And so what I'm going to be doing each month is talking in more detail about 1 or 2 of the program priorities. What I want from you, members, is to focus on a few of the priorities that you think are important and relevant to your particular counties or areas. So Greater Grays Harbor, North Beach, the Peninsula. What are the important priorities that you think are relevant to the people that you are communicating with? And then think about what you'd like to work on, what you'd like to investigate further, and then talk about these priorities when it's appropriate, whether it's at a plant clinic or the demonstration garden, or if you're planning workshops or presentations. So for example, in preparation for Jo Ellen this morning and her talk, I thought, well, maybe, I don't know, but maybe she'll want to talk about nearby nature or maybe biodiversity. So check what it says, the snapshot of what it says for these program priorities like plant biodiversity or nearby nature, and think about it. Brenda and I have toolkits that go into more detail if you want to use it in a workshop for the community. And we're certainly going to be going into a lot of detail in our training for 2024 on these. So I just wanted to do a heads up that this is where we're going, and I'll be probably going over each one in more detail in the coming months. That's it.
Very good. Thank you, Alina. So again, it looks like there's 9 of these program priorities. And it's, I think as you noted there at the end, this is going to become a key emphasis when we start thinking about training for the next cohort. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Very good. Okay. So hey, quickly, other announcements.
I want to say, and it includes climate change for the first time. So I'm really excited about that.
Very good point. Hey, other announcements and updates from anyone.
This is Karen. I can give you an update on the state.
Please, Karen. Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I'm going to talk about the tour that happened in Grays Harbor. And I just got the figures. We didn't make very much money, but everybody that went on, this was the tour at the Westport Winery. And I have to thank Sharon Golightly because she really put this together. And Kim Roberts at the winery did just a fantastic job of leading this tour of all the gardens and into the place where they make wine. And then the restaurant was awesome. And they had wine tasting and so forth. So for the people that participated, it was an awesome tour. I went on the tour myself. And anyway, we didn't make very much money, but we certainly spread some goodwill around, I would say. We made $130.59. Our foundation.
Well, the 59 cents is really going to count a lot for sure.
Yeah. And the
But
second thing, go ahead.
No,
You
I was
have-
going to, and again, I wanted to underscore this, the shout out to Sharon Golightly, because I know there was a lot of preparation, Sharon, that you put into actually planning and organizing the tour.
Yes, she did. And the second thing I want to talk about is something that happened at the state meeting. And Master Gardeners are going to have a booth at the flower show that happens in February in Seattle. And I hadn't heard anything about it. I don't know where they sent the email to, not to me as a rep. And I asked Don about it at the meeting and he said, well, they just hadn't gotten in touch with everybody yet. Have they gotten in touch with you, Kelly or Sabine?
Sabine, you have your hand
No.
up.
Yes, for something, for an announcement. But no one has gotten in. Pardon?
You're going to talk about it then?
No, I'm going to talk about the committee work, something else.
Okay. Well, anyway, they want a commitment from all the local foundations for an amount of money to help fund this booth. And most of the foundations have given quite generously, some are even $1,000. So whoever got this information and where the money goes, I propose that we do send some money from Grace Harbor Pacific County to support this.
Yeah. Well, let's pick that up at our board meeting. To my knowledge, it sounds like none of us have heard
No, I
about
haven't
this.
gotten anything.
You're the first. This is the first we're hearing about it. We can pick this up at the
Right.
board meeting later.
Okay. And I
Okay.
can find out more by talking to Don because,
Very good.
yeah, he just said, oh, well, we haven't gotten to everybody yet. So, yeah. So that's it. And hopefully nobody got sick at the conference in our group. Because we did have a COVID outbreak at the conference.
No, not altogether unexpected. Yes.
Yeah.
Sabine, you have your hand up.
Yes, I'm wondering if this is a good time or if we should do it at the board meeting, because we have formed a committee to do the policy procedure review and also job description. And I want to finalize because I want to get going with this in October. Is this a good time to do it or shall we do it at the board?
No,
meeting?
this is a great time to make a pitch to everyone.
Right,
You
that's
know,
what I
yeah.
thought. So we are going to, I have 6 wonderful people on my list, and this is an opportunity for you, if you still would like to join the committee to review the policies and procedures. To my knowledge, the last time it was reviewed and revised was 2013. I may be wrong, but it's been a while and it should really be done on a regular basis. And also job descriptions. And I plan to attend the meeting on the 22nd in Hoquiam because we talk about this new position, and I'm sure a job description will probably distill out of that, at least guidelines for that. Currently for this procedure and the policy and procedure committee, I have Elizabeth, Beth, Sushila, Jude, Mary Shane, and Sharon KB, which I think is a great group because we may have different views, and we'll be just great working on this. If anyone else would still like to join the committee, my plan is this. so that you know. I try to be short. We have to do job descriptions as well, and that includes a president, vice president, the different coordinators. Well, you can see it on the website. I'll send out an email. We just reviewed and voted on the bylaws, so we'll put those aside for now, and we will really work. In my mind, I think the most important thing is to work on the job descriptions. We have elections. We will talk about how to structure the board and how to work on this next year. It is my hope to get job descriptions done actually before the end of the year, and then in January start on policies and procedures. So my question here for you is, my first question is for Sharon KB. Would you please be the one who will master the Zoom for us when we agree on a time and a day? Sharon?
Yeah, I can do that.
I would appreciate it. Thank you so much. My next question is, I know from the bylaws that people were quite capable or quite able to join the committee on a weekday, middle of the day. And I was wondering if those who are on the committee, which is Elizabeth, Bev, Sushila, Jude, Mary Shane, and Sharon, who will master us with the Zoom, if Thursday, either 10 to 11:30 or in the afternoon from 1 to 2:30 would work for those on the committee. If so, would you please indicate it would work for you with your, maybe in the chat, or let me know now, because then I can schedule it. I would like to start actually next week. So any comments on the time frame? I know it's a little bit springing a surprise on you, but it was going to be after the education conference. I will be sending out the old job descriptions to everyone so that you know what we're working with, and then we'll just take it from there. And we will go really pretty much line by line and make you know, revisions and all that. So how does it sound for, we start Thursday the 20th at let's say from 1 to 2:30. Is that okay with everyone? If not, please speak up.
I'm speaking up.
Okay.
Thursdays is our work day at the demonstration garden, and it's also the last work day before we're having our October event.
Okay.
So I would like definitely to beg off for the morning. I might be able to come for a mid-afternoon, like at 2.
From 2 to 3:30?
Yeah.
How would this work for others? And I see
Fine.
some hands up, just Sheila.
Fine. It's fine for me.
So it would be Thursday from 2 to 3:30 would be okay. I think after an hour and a half, we will have enough of it. I would hope 2 hours, but anyone else, would this work for everyone? If we start Thursday, the 20th at 2 to 3:30, and then at this meeting, we can discuss if that's a time we stay once a month or maybe twice a month. I have something here in the year, everyone. Okay, for Bev is okay with that too. Anyone who cannot make it. So we stick with that. And Sharon, will this be okay, or will someone else use that time slot?
So Sabine, I think it's useful. I think you probably can, use email to, to nail down some of the last minute details and, get a Zoom URL together. But very good.
Okay.
And
So
again, a shout out to everyone who wants to participate still on the committee, because obviously we still need this is a lot of support and very important. So it definitely want to encourage people to engage.
Okay, so I'll do that. Whatever has not been nailed down right now, we'll do it through email. And I know Jude asked about the older job descriptions, all that. We'll do this by email, and I send it out to you in portions, so not all at once, so we start with the job descriptions and I send out the old ones, and we'll do it by email. Okay, thank you so much, Kelly. That's it then for me.
Thank you, Sabine. Terry, did I see you have wanting to speak?
Yes, I just want to say that we've already started work on the 2023 Home and Garden Show. And the first work we're doing is actually to get the tourism, the 2023 tourism request in. And that needs to happen this week. Mary Shane and I are working on it, and we're actually going to add some new things to where we advertise, since that's basically what the grant pays for, is our publicity. So the work has started.
And so the dates for the 2023 show are?
Oh, I think it's the May 20th and 21st, I think, are the dates.
So it's the weekend after Mother's Day, right?
Yes, yes.
Very good. Hey, and a shout out, thank you, by the way, to you and to your husband, Bill, for hosting us for our September picnic. I mean, all of us who attended and participated really enjoyed being there with you. And it was great to get together again, face to face, and in the gardens and in your gazebo. So it was a lot of fun. Thank you.
We enjoyed it very much as well. I love those face-to-face things.
Other comments, announcements, updates from anyone?
I have the time for the study group next week. It's from 6 to 8 on Zoom, and the link is on our email, last e-news.
Very good. Thank you, Jude. That's for sure. So again, 6 p.m. next Monday. And Jude, the topic for the study group?
I think it's putting the garden to bed. Let's see, let me read a little further. Yeah, it is. So what we do to get the garden ready for winter, and planting some cover crops would be one of those things, I'm sure. For me, it's moving pots around.
Very good. Thanks, Jude. Okay, just a couple of other updates here as we move on to things here. I wanted to make a couple of comments regarding the officers election that's coming up. Remember the details that Alina was sharing, was talking about the WSU Master Gardener program and the particulars, the program priorities that we'll be following, as Master Gardeners. We are gathering here today, of course, as a foundation. So we are a separate 501c3 nonprofit corporation registered in the state of Washington here. And we follow bylaws, right? Which we all recently updated just a couple months ago. And as you heard from Sabine, we'll be working on further updates and refinements as we get into the fall. But per our bylaws, right, at the October meeting, right, we shall elect, right, a series of officers for the next year. Because we're in a Zoom world, we're not going to be conducting the election now at the meeting. I'll be sending out a ballot to everyone with candidates that'll be going out in the next few days. Note that there are three, per the bylaws, there are three groups, right, that are going to be elected. That they're going to have an officer elected as a director elected. That'll be a representative to the board coming from three geographic groups in our foundation here in Pacific County, in North Beach, and in Greater Grays Harbor. And that goes back to the October 22nd meeting of the Greater Grays Harbor meeting. That group, that'll be the first time that group will come together. And so again, it speaks to the importance of that organization and of that meeting, because this will be the first time that group is meeting to organize and to hopefully prepare and elect a representative to the board. So remember the current board for this year, our 2022 candidates, we have PJ now up in Fairbanks, Sabine is our president-elect, and the other representatives throughout the various officers and the various positions. The 2023 candidate list, Sabine will roll into the president role. We need a president-elect candidate. We also need a program support candidate. Margie, is going to continue in her role, early into the year, but definitely is looking for some support and for replacement. Public outreach and education, those roles will likely be retired as the Greater Grays Harbor group takes on responsibilities for the Elma Demo Garden and for activities up in Greater Grays Harbor, and Pacific County and North Beach continue in their roles as providing educational opportunities and demo garden and demo bed activities in their geographies. So you can see there's some restructuring going on, which again also speaks to the importance of the Greater Grays Harbor organization and the decisions that they'll be making therein. So Sheila, I see you have your hand up, and Sabine, I know you have your hand up. So so Sheila, you want to go first? Or is that a hand up from the last time?
I don't think I put my hand up, so disregard that.
Okay, I will lower your hand for you. There you go.
Thank you.
Sabine, you have your hand up.
I know, I see we still, right, thank you. We still are looking for a president-elect, and I really want to make a plug here. It's not as bad as you think. No, no. I would like for someone to please step forward if you feel so inclined, and I can see the benefits of really having succession in having leadership. And if you have a little bit on the fence, but you would be interested in being president-elect, I would be mentoring you, probably starting now for sure in 2023. And I gave it some thought how I would mentor a president-elect. It would be fairly structured. And even with a little handbook, I would sit down over the holidays and write something up from the experiences I had. So if you are interested at all in becoming president-elect, in meeting lots of interesting people, getting very involved in things, and also experiencing the support from those who are wiser than you are, and I'm relying and leaning on those a lot, please do, do a little soul searching, and maybe we will have a president-elect for our elections that are coming up soon, I hope. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Sabine. So a question from Lori in the comments talking about the program support position, and I know Margie's on, and so I'll turn it over to you to actually share some thoughts, Margie. But the role primarily is to especially in our face-to-face meetings, is to help with organizing the hospitality at such meetings. And in particular, coming up on the November recognition meeting that we'll be talking about here in a moment, it's helping to organize the various hospitality elements that would go into any of our face-to-face meetings. But Margie, you want to share more, talk about the role, because you've been serving in this capacity for a number of years now.
That's a good portion of it. We also have some techie aspects in terms of website management. So we're probably it would be helpful to have somebody who has some computer expertise that could work with Chris Cole and, kind of keep that going as well. And as we get closer to having more in-person meetings, there's some hospitality required there in terms of setting up meetings. And again, some technical background, I'm guessing, in terms of if we do that along with Zoom meetings at the same time.
Thank you, Margie. So Lori, hopefully you'll have some thoughts and want to share some other interest here. Any other questions regarding the candidate list? Any other thoughts? Again, the ballot, I'll be sending a ballot out so we can formally elect and officially elect candidates. But a reminder, of course, as a service organization, stepping forward to volunteer, is indeed part of what it's all about. A special thank you, by the way, to the nominating committee, Elizabeth, Bev, Mike, Lori, Clara, and Sharon KB, in terms of putting together the candidates here for the 2023 slots. So congratulations on your work in terms of making this thing happen. And then again, be on the lookout for an email ballot that'll be coming, your way in the email in the next, days or weeks here. So a quick reminder, of course, that Tony continues as our liaison to WSU, and Alina and Brenda continue as our coordinators. Very important to have those roles supported. Reminder, of course, from Alina and from Brenda to get those hours in, get those hours recorded. So very important. And Alina, Brenda, any comments with respect to how we're doing, or any thoughts or counsel to any of us here relative to getting those hours in?
This is Elena, and I put it in the e-news, but I just wanted to remind people, thank you so much for posting your volunteer hours each month. I'm checking them once a week, and I'm getting anywhere from 50 to 80 posts each time I log in. So I really, really appreciate that. And I just want you to remember that your hours in the demo gardens should be recorded as demo garden hours. We have some people that have started using community garden as a program category, and here at Grays Harbor, Pacific Counties, we don't have community hours, community garden hours, just demo gardens. Um, but if you have questions, contact me or refer to the handbook, page 22. It talks about the difference between community garden hours and demo garden hours. That's all I have to say.
And I would
Excellent.
like to add that I ran another report yesterday, and I will be contacting by email or phone 24 certified and emeritus master gardeners who have not entered 1 hour yet for 2022. So anything that they can do along that lines would be greatly appreciated.
Very good. So you've been warned here. You know, Brenda's on the warpath here, coming after you. Get those hours in. And again, we'll be talking, this is a great opportunity to pitch the upcoming program. We actually plan to meet face-to-face on November 8th, Saturday. Excuse me, that's November 5th. My mistake. That is November 5th, Log Pavilion. That'll be a Saturday, November 5th, in which we'll have a potluck and a recognition event. So and this will be at the Log Pavilion in Aberdeen. So we'll get we'll obviously have the information fixed by the time we get formal announcements coming out, but do put it on your calendar because we want to meet then on Saturday for a potluck for our next program there. Okay. And then without further ado, I'm going to stop my share and turn it over to Jo Ellen Meyers Sharp, you know, and to who actually comes to us, from a long ways away, but with a very special program and a very special thought, special thoughts with respect to gardening across the entire country here. And again, please make note of the URL that you see in there, the eepearl.com GKFB91, at which you'll see an opportunity to subscribe to her blog. Perhaps it might be easier just to get there via the HoosierGardener.com website that Jo Ellen maintains. But again, at this point, I want to go ahead and stop my share, and then allow you, Jo Ellen, to pick up and share and pick it up from there. We're thrilled to have you with us here today.
Okay, I don't really have anything to share from my screen. That's
share
you.
Go to your website.
Well, I could do that. I'm trying to figure out how to make me here. Choose video, stop video. Okay. Let's see. See, it has me, it has you as the speaker.
Go down to your share screen and you can share.
Oh, here I see. Okay. Thank you. Well, I don't really have a screen to share. Let's see. I was just going to be me.
There you go. I can go right back up to I can share the slide we're sharing here.
Okay. Do that.
So welcome.
Yeah. What do we have here? Do we have me on the screen? Because I don't see me on the screen.
We're seeing you.
Okay, that's good. Well, thank you so much for having me speak to you today. I've been kind of looking forward to it. Last week, Kelly and I had a good conversation about what we thought might actually work. And just to start off, I thought I would just tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in a family of German immigrants in Indianapolis. And when my great-grandfather came here, he was a trained nurseryman from Germany. And they started a greenhouse operation and a florist in Indianapolis. And I grew up about a block from that business. And I have very strong memories of running down the dirt alley from my house to the flower shop. We call it the flower shop, and the greenhouses. And so, you know, the idea of growing plants was always sort of a part of my life, but I never really embraced it until I grew up and I bought a house. And I read this article in the Indianapolis Star about this sort of perfect container. It had pink geraniums, blue ageratum, and yellow marigolds. And so I did, I potted up this container of the geraniums, the marigolds, and the ageratum. And I really liked it. I thought it was just so much fun to do. And my uncle at the time had a greenhouse. He was a grower. He grew for the retail trade. And so I started working down there part-time. And if you dial up the Wayback Machine, this is when, you know, salvias were called St. John's tongue. And trying to think what we had. We had a funky name for impatiens also. But anyway, you know, that's where I sort of learned the idea of growing annuals, how you could use annuals. And they became an important part of my life because I lived on a property where I had 2 huge trees and very little sun. So I started growing just plants in pots. I grew tomatoes in pots, I grew peppers in pots, and I grew a lot of annuals in pots. And, you know, eventually I worked for a newspaper and I started writing about gardening. I went to the features editor and I said, you know, let me know if you'd ever like to get a new garden writer. The garden writer they had was not very good. And he frequently wrote about plants. There were never any photos of whatever the plants were he was talking about. They were never, even though I was sort of new to the idea of gardening, none of the plants he talked about were on the radar of anything I'd read. And so the editor told me to write 3 columns, which I did. The first column was about how when you grow tomatoes, you can get a green thumb. And just sort of expanding on that, the idea that you can get your own green thumb, you don't have to have a black thumb. And if you've grown tomatoes and touched them, you know that you can get green on your thumb. So that was the whole idea of that. And so it worked. I wrote a weekly gardening column for the newspaper for 30 years. The year I became president of Garden Writers, they decided that my garden column did not have good metrics. And so they ditched me out of the paper. And at that time, I had just coincidentally been thinking about creating my own newsletter. And that's what I did. And so when I wrote my last column to the readers, I mentioned that I had this gardening, I was going to start this gardening newsletter. And in one day I had 500 subscriptions. And now I have about 2,600 subscriptions, which I think is really cool. And so that little URL that you had in the beginning slide is actually how you can sign up for my newsletter, which is free and monthly. And I'm proud to say that it's won some awards, which is kind of nice. Anyway, so from there at the newspaper, garden writing was a freelance job. It wasn't like part of my job. I was a different kind of reporter. I was covering higher education and business and labor and all of that while I was learning to write about gardening. And I joined Garden Writers. But the thing about it is, as I sort of took my readers along with me as I was learning things, it was easy for me to write about, oh, this is how you grow a dahlia, or this is how you grow a tomato, or this is how you get rid of weeds. I mean, it just was, I was able to share my experiences with the reader and sort of bring them along with me, which, you know, I thought was kind of cool to be able to do that. And I know today I run into people all the time who tell me they have, you know, copies of my columns cut out in their books and things like that. It was hard for me to leave the paper because I felt really connected to the readers. in a way that as a newspaper reporter, which is actually what my life was, you don't really feel that same connection to the sources that you talk to or anything like that. There's more of a, that wall, that professional wall. But as a garden writer, they always feel like they can ask you any questions. And certainly I, can answer any of the questions. But I really learned a lot in writing about gardening and being a member of Garden Writers. And then I left the newspaper. I went out on my own as a freelance writer, and I went to work for a very large independent garden center here in Indianapolis. I started there part-time, just selling plants. And then I worked there for about 3 years full-time, where I bought perennials and trees and shrubs. But working at the garden center just was so informative about what the customers are looking for, what they ask about. I really didn't have that in my life because I was, a writer and doing other things. I wasn't really, face to face with customers trying to decide what plants they wanted to buy. And so, they would come into the garden center and they'd tell you about their space, and you'd say, well, what direction is your garden going to face? And they say, it's in front of the garage, and so the answer is, you don't really know the answer to that. And I found that you have to ask a lot of questions in order to give an informed answer. The people will come in and say they want a blue plant. And you say, okay, do you want it to come back every year? Do you want it to just be there for a short time? Do you want it to be a spike? Do you want it to be kind of a rounded, and so there's a lot of just inexperience, I think, with gardeners. And the last 2 years have been really incredible. If you're on Facebook at all, that there's, like millions of more gardeners out there trying to figure out how to grow their own food, growing their plants, fretting over their house plants. And all of that is just, how we learn about how other people approach gardening, what their context for it is and why they do it. And so, I started container planting also when I left the newspaper. I call it a mosaic existence. There's a little chip here for that kind of business and a little chip here for this kind of business. Some days there are chips missing, but you just kind of keep sort of reinventing yourself. So I started doing containers because I just really like doing containers. I think that they're fun to do. The customers always ooh and ah and appreciate what you do. And I've learned a lot from that. I've learned which plants can handle benign neglect and which can be abandoned and halfway still survive, because I don't actually maintain the containers. I only plant them. And I do about between 100 and 150 pots 3 or 4 times a year, depending on what schedule the client is on. I've got 4 more fall pots to do today. So I'm looking forward to kind of getting done with that, and then you can bill, And so at the garden center, I was also able to do classes on teaching people how to do containers and, winter arrangements and everything like that. So it just, my business has grown primarily by word of mouth. I think in the fact that people knew my name as a garden writer. I've done a lot of public speaking here and other places. And so, that's opened a whole lot of doors for me. The biggest client I have are the Indiana State Fairgrounds, which is sort of one of my problem clients because they actually water the containers, but they water the containers from a truck with a tank on the truck. And they're like going by like this, And so when we did the fall stuff, I said, could we try deeply watering the containers, so that, you don't just like go 30 miles an hour with your hose, and see if we can't like deepen it a little bit. But those are just, some of the problems you have when you do containers. It's a little bit disheartening, to show up at the end of one season and see them all fried, but you know, that's what it is. I'm fortunate in that in the grower side of my family, my first cousin still is a grower on Indianapolis South Side. And so he grows all of, I would say about 98% of the plants I use in people's pots. I have a wholesale license, so I'm able to buy plants wholesale. And so I order all that great West Coast greenery for Christmas, which, you know, is shipped here. That's where it comes from. And, you know, and so I've been to Seattle a few times. My daughter-in-law is from Seattle, and, you know, I've met her family there. But the first time I went there was when we had an annual garden writers meeting there. And I can remember getting off the bus and walking up to this one property, and there was a red begonia that was at least, you know, 15 inches tall. And it wasn't just the big begonias, you know, those big begonias haven't been on the market yet. This was just a regular bedding geranium. And I decided that where you are, when the season starts in February, you can get regular old annual plants that are only going to get about like this big where I am, you know, 12 inches tall or more. And so, you know, that got me thinking about some of the differences and the similarities that we might have. And so, you know, the differences, of course, are climate, rainfall. Kelly said you get what, 80 inches of rainfall a season or something like that, which is like, we'd all be drowned here. And that, you know, just the overall environment itself is different because you have salty air, which I hadn't really thought about. I think about, you know, salt tolerant plants as those near the road where they might get splashed on by road ice melt or something like that. And that you have cooler temperatures, so you have a really short growing season, I would guess, for warm weather crops like tomatoes and peppers, or that you would have to grow them, you know, under cover of some kind to maintain that heat. That your soil is different. You know, I have clay soil. Our soil is primarily alkaline, our water's alkaline. And so, you know, it's just learning how to grow in that kind of an environment, what kind of light you have. And the other thing that's probably different are your views. We don't have a lot of mountain or ocean views where I am. And then I thought, well, what about the similarities? What similarities do we have? And I came up with plants. That's our similarities. We may have all these different growing conditions, but sort of what drives us to garden, I think, are the plants. To me, they're just the joy of gardening and the reward of gardening, just to observe them and look at them, how they open and close, what pollinators visit them, what insects will eat them. You know, I'm a naturally curious person. I'm not afraid to ask questions, and I've got great resources at the great Purdue University. I'm sure you've heard of Purdue. You know, I'm an entomologist up there that is just great to talk to. And he's really good at explaining things, so then I can explain that to my readers, or the people who read my newsletter or send me emails. Excuse me. And like you, I'm an advanced master gardener. I have more than 1,000 volunteer hours. I have a little badge that tells me that. And I've taught several programs for master gardeners. And I just like teaching about gardening and teaching about plants and trying to, you know, get other people to look at plants in such a way that it brings them joy and it brings them to success. And that's sort of, I want to make them successful so that garden centers thrive, garden writers thrive, you know, plant growers thrive. There's nothing worse than having somebody tell you that they've grown these plants and they kill everything. They have a black thumb, you know, where Kelly and I were talking last week, and it's like when you kill something, you learn something. You know, you learned you didn't have the right area for the plant or the right growing conditions. You know, in my yard, it's usually 3 strikes and you're out. So I might move a plant along a few times just to see if I can get it to do something. And if it doesn't, it dies. And when I speak to people, I tell them, they have permission to kill plants. That when you kill a plant, you learn that that didn't work. And then you try to figure out what you can do to make it work. So those are kind of the ballparks here. Kelly, do you want to ask and see if anybody has any questions
Yeah,
or comments?
let's open it up here, because this is again, it's fascinating looking through your website as you've been chatting here and talking about the breadth of gardening experiences that you provide consulting and you speak about. I'm really curious, going back to your containers in particular, the common errors. What are the most common errors that people make, right? So you prepare these beautiful containers, you get them all set up, right? You get them all laid out. And then what happens? I'm presuming at this point, you've actually thought about the placement relative to wind and sun. You've obviously got the plants ideally fertilized and watered when you leave them. What goes wrong at that point?
Well, the thing that goes wrong most of the time is people don't water them. That's the biggest issue that I have with clients. But I sort of think about, how I want the pots to look. And you have these different clients. So I may have a client that doesn't want any pink flowers, or I have a client who only wants a tropical look, or, I have a client I jokingly refer to his porch as one shade above dark. And so, it's just trying to find plants that are actually going to live in the environment where those containers are. I plant on site. So, I don't have to schlep around those big heavy pots or anything like that. But I, excuse me, I trial about 100 plants a year. And sometimes I'll put trial plants in, clients' pots. I don't charge them for those plants, but I kind of want to see what they're going to do. I have a pretty small yard, so I can't plant everything. And so I want to see, what they're going to do, what their opinion of them are, and things like that, which then I can feed back to the growers or marketers who send me the plants.
I'm very impressed by the fall plants that we're looking at here in terms of your use of gourds and pumpkins, right? Interspersed in with kale, and and I'm curious from an Indiana perspective, when would you plant your fall containers, and how long would you expect them to maintain? Would they last into December?
They usually last until December. Yes, I usually do fall containers the last part of September and the first part of October. And so, that's everything is ready to go then. I use a lot of edible plants. I have a couple of chefs that I work for that I do their containers. So I try to put mustards and kales and chards and things like that in their containers so that they can go out there and snip off leaves or two like that. But I like to mix things together. The gourds are always risky only because the squirrels like gourds and pumpkins. And so they'll find those a lot of times and, eat them, drag them out of the pots and eat them. I've had in one commercial area, I've had somebody throw up in the container. And I was at a meeting in Atlanta and the owner calls me and tells me, that she's got this pot that it's got all this vomit in it. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what to do about that. And so, we figured let it harden, then you might be able to wash it out. And then the same people, somebody actually stole their whole pot. And so, that was kind of a challenge. You had to find a whole new one and everything like that. But I like to play around with stuff. Some customers are more playful. Some will say, I want something dramatic, or, they want something that looks, like farm or something. They might have their own choices. But in general, everybody sort of gets the same thing. They might get a different mix of what it is, but when you order plants for that many containers, you really need to get those plants in those pots, and just enough of a little bit of a variance to make each person feel like theirs is totally different. I get a lot of ideas from the Indianapolis Museum of Art, which is now called Newfields. One of my really good friends is the horticultural display curator, and he creates a lot of the designs for containers that they have there. And I've been able to mimic some of those things. You know, one of my clients know that I've copied painting, you know, curly willow for Easter colors or for spring colors and putting them in their pots because I saw it last year at the art museum, you know.
Connie, you have your hand up. Question.
Yes, so you said that you take all your stuff to the client's property. Do you provide all the potting soil? Do you provide the pot? Oh, do they tell you what color of a container they want or how big?
They, you know, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I would say about 90% of the time I just do what I want to do there, which is kind of nice that they trust me to do that. When I'm taking on a new client, I do try to get an idea, either visiting the property or having them take photos of and the dimensions of the pots, so I know what we're working with, what kind of light they have. That's always a challenge for some people. They don't always realize that, you know, they may have an east facing garden, but they've got trees on the south side that really inhibit, you know, how the light moves through their property. And so, you know, I try to do it that way. If they have special requests, I do honor those, but most of the time I just kind of do what we're going to do. I work with my sister. She and we do the big jobs. At the state fair, we bring in, you know, I pay $20 an hour for people to come and help plant. And, you know, we'll try to get 7 to 10 people for each time we're planting at the fairgrounds. And I've learned that instead of, you know what 1801s are? So those are like 18 plants in a flat, which are great for a lot of different containers. But at the fairgrounds, because they have so many, I started growing things in 8-inch pots, which, so I've got like pansies in 8-inch pots or snaps in 8-inch pots rather than little individual plants. And it's just showier. And for the fairgrounds, which is, you know, a huge property, you know, you need something that's going to have some impact to it right away rather than waiting for the plants to develop and take up space.
That's a question I wanted to ask then. How long do you expect your plantings in the container to thrive, right? You know, so you're planning for, you know, 6 weeks, you know.
Well, the stuff I'm doing now will be there until probably we'll start doing change outs late in November. And we're usually done by the first week of December doing winter. So we're pulling out all the fall stuff. I mean, a lot of the fall stuff can take, you know, some chill. Pansies seem to do fairly well. You know, the chards and the mustard seem to be able to tolerate. If we had a, you know, really hard freeze and everything was covered with ice, that would be a different story. But, you know, it's relatively semi-mild going into December. And so I get all my greenery usually in November, early, you know, first or second week of November, and I start getting it out as soon as I can. I usually do the commercial clients first, you know, because it's whatever, you know, it's just their business. And, but I do the fairgrounds last because it's a big job and I need to bring on a lot of people to do that.
Jude, you have your microphone ready to go. You have a question?
Oh, I do have, I do. Yes, I'm very eager to hear what kind of greenery you import from our wonderful Pacific Northwest. I think I can imagine a few of them, but I'm sure all of us would like to hear what they are.
Well, Some I like are probably invasive species for you, because I like the broom, the Scotch broom. I think that's an invasive species where
Yes.
you are, isn't it?
We'll send you all of it.
Yeah. Well, I like that. We get the white-tipped cedars, the cone cedars. We get some of the arborvitae, the long strands of the arborvitae, and pine. We get little, pine shoots. And then what I also do is I grow a lot of hydrangeas. These are not the hydrangea macrophyllas. They're ones that actually grow here. So they're like the native Annabelles or something like that. And I cut those in winter, and they're already dried on the plant. And then I spray paint them and use them in the outdoor pots. So I have some Jewish clients. And so I always want to make sure I have silver and blue for, Hanukkah for their containers. And then, most everybody else wants red or, other kinds of holiday colors. And so that's, sort of how I do it. It's, I have a more natural, I think, look to my pots rather than, just a whole lot of drama. I buy some fake red berries, because if you plant winterberry holly here or any holly here, it's there for about a day and a half because the birds eat all the berries. And then it doesn't even look like you've done anything. I can remember the first time I walked up on this one client's, and that there were no berries on any of these hollies. It was just shocking. I thought, my gosh, who took all the berries, and it was the birds. So, I use artificial berries for some of that. I use pine cones on, sticks that you can put in there. I buy some colored ornaments sometimes to fill in. And I tell people they can take the Christmassy stuff out or the holiday stuff out, and then they've still got the container. And in general, the container, I try to get them to look at the plants a little differently. That as they brown out or they buff out, then you're enjoying sort of the textures that they provide and sort of the subtlety of the browns, just to get them so that they can make it until the middle of March to the end of March, which is when I change everything out for spring. So again, it's just sort of helping them understand what the beauty is as these plants go through the season. And, I tell people all the time with shade who come in and they're tired of impatiens, and they don't know what to do. And I tell them that green is a color. And so, they can just think about, using greens and textures, tropical plants and things like that, instead of, bright red geraniums or something.
It's fascinating, your comments there about using hardscape, quote unquote. I mean, with respect to ornaments or other, physical, artificial things to add color, and context to what you're doing there.
Yeah, well, you guys can do all that. I mean, you have the hollies and everything, and hollies are an acid loving plant, and they just really don't thrive here. So we have to bring them in from somewhere. And they seem to come from the West Coast.
Other questions, comments for Jo Ellen?
If I could ask
I
another
figure, but
question.
yeah.
We are seeing changes here with the climate shifting. And I was wondering if in the Midwest you're seeing, I'm a University of Wisconsin graduate, so I know what gardening was there at that time. But I'm wondering, has it changed much over the last several decades? We're seeing some big changes.
Well, I know you are. I have a lot of garden writer colleagues on the West Coast in Washington and in Oregon. And, the talk about the heat waves that the folks in Oregon have been having have been, pretty amazing to see. It's hard for me to see that exactly. I mean, I'm not saying it's not there. It's just that it hasn't been as dramatic, I don't think, here as it's been on the coast. There are sections of the Midwest excuse me, like up in Wisconsin and Iowa, where they've had a lot of rain and, storms, things like that, and a lot of flooding. We've not had that where I am. We had a long, hot, dry summer this last year, but it's not something that I can say, oh, it must be climate change that this is happening. I don't have that sense here. I'm sure that the botanist and the ecologist could probably list 15 things that they've noticed that they can attribute to that. But in my own personal life and in the work that I do with my clients, it's not something that comes up very often. It's not to say we're not mindful of it. I mean, I don't use pesticides in my garden. I try to understand how water moves through a property, which I think is really important. But as I was telling Kelly last week, the thing about climate change, aside from plants, I sort of think plants will adapt in some ways, or the ones that we relied on to do something will move on to do something else, and something else will move in that'll do that job for us. But I worry more about the wildlife, the insects, and the birds who migrate at certain times. And if, in climate change, at the plants, they're arriving here and, the plants have already bloomed and shed their berries, what are the birds going to eat when they get here? Because, we're advanced from what their normal traditional migration pattern is. And those kinds of things kind of bother me, probably on a more personal level than if this plant got fried or didn't get fried.
That's an interesting point about climate change, because you notice that what Alina was talking about earlier in the program is that climate change is now, a priority topic, right, for the WSU Master Gardener program. So this is the first time that it's being recognized, right, as an issue that they want us as Master Gardeners to talk about and include into our public program. So that's a big movement forward, right, when you think about the empowering us as Master Gardeners to speak on behalf of the WSU Extension, regarding climate change.
Well, and if we look at the new, well, it's not new, it's probably 10 years old now, but the USDA map that kind of moved people from different zones, we went from zone 5 to zone 6. And, the year they did that, we had, I don't know, like 10 days of 15 degrees below zero in a row, so I realized that their view is much, longitudinal compared to, what's happening in the winter at that particular time. But at Purdue, and as a Purdue Master Gardener, we still say for trees and shrubs to look at 5 or 4. You can mess around with zone 6 perennials and stuff like that, and maybe some zone 6 certain shrubs. But if you're really looking for a long-term plant in the landscape, Purdue still says zone 5 should be the highest that you go for.
Questions, comments, again, for Jo Ellen? It is fascinating to think about, the similarities and the contrast between gardening 2,000 miles away in a very different climate.
Yeah.
You talk about zone 5 and 6, and of course, we're way over, we're a whole different world over here. And again, you
Yeah.
start thinking about just the demo garden discussions we just had earlier in the meeting here, right? The different climates just within the foundations, just within our 2 county areas here.
Yeah, like cover crops, we do cover crops here, but like growing under tunnels or something like that, that's really at the early and end of the season, where I have friends who live in the UP, and they have very short season. They have I think about 2 weeks of actual growing up there in the Upper Peninsula, and so they grow short season crops. They try to get, fast tomatoes that, that deliver fruit all the time. Like Celebrity is big up there because it's, it just has its fruit all at the same time rather than spacing it out. And so I don't know, do you guys do that there? Do you have certain crops that you can get growing and producing in the time frame that you have?
we clearly spend a lot of time recommending the public, that they don't think about anything longer than 100 days. Right. We really push them to the
Okay.
seed packets, make sure they're reading the seed packets in terms of how
Yeah.
fast those crops can mature. Kathleen, I see you have your microphone unmuted.
Yeah, I'm from Northwest Indiana, and some of my family is still in the greater Chicago area.
The
And
region, we call it the region.
yeah, that's right, the region. Anyway,
Yeah.
anyway, I being in touch with them or visiting at different times, I do see a change in the climate. It's really noticeable. And for instance, it was never shirt sleeves weather at Christmas 50 years ago, for instance, or
Oh,
60
yeah.
years ago. Yeah, and there's much less snow. It's different. In some ways, it is very different.
Yeah. Sorry about my phone. I threw it out of the office, but it's not being quiet. Yeah, I know that. I mean, we have, unseasonably warm winters and that. But I don't know. I think gardeners sort of roll with it. They just adapt and say, well, it's not going to work here. This plant is not going to work here. I'm hoping kudzu doesn't make it here.
So I think that kind of characterizes the whole theme, is this laissez-faire from your standpoint, right? Let's put something in, let's just find a plant that works, right? Don't torture yourself and trying to do unnatural things with your plantings.
But native plants are to me, the most adaptable, that they are, they've been growing in similar conditions for a long time. And, we don't really know exactly what happened umpteen years ago, that maybe there was a big heat wave, in the same way that we're anticipating for here, or no rain or too much rain. And over generations, a lot of those plants have adapted to those situations, which is why I think incorporating native plants is always good in the garden, even if, I'm too much of a plant geek to have only native plants. And I would say that some native plants are more garden worthy than others. But, definitely native plants should be an important part of whatever ecosystem you have in your garden.
Rick, you have your microphone unmuted.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
I sort of take care of the potted plants down at the demonstration garden we have down in Elma, our main garden. And the plants you show here in pots are so beautiful. How often do you have to go back to your clients' homes to maintain them, to keep them like this and keep them watering them and maintaining them when you're not there?
I don't maintain the pots.
You let the clients maintain them then?
Yeah.
And but you give them instructions on how to do it, I'm sure.
I give them instructions. I usually give them a packet of, or a little container of Miracle Grow, water soluble. They, just to kind of just get them the idea of fertilizing them periodically. And, I'm really not a big fan of the Osmocote. Or is that what it is? Or no, what are the little gel things that you can put in plants to help them hold water? I hate those. I think they keep things too wet.
Yeah, we stopped using those a few years ago here. Yeah.
Yeah, they, and then some clients have irrigation systems for their containers, which I think is a true luxury, to have those. Some are better about taking care of them than others. It's just, kind of how it is. But fortunately, I don't have to go back and take care of them. I kind of drive by sometimes, especially the commercial clients, to see how they're doing. And I might call the owner and say, oh, those plants look a little dry. you know, could you send your maintenance guy over there to water them? But at the end of the season, when you're ripping out summer and putting in fall, you kind of have an idea of how things are going.
Yeah, because, you know, in Aberdeen here, they have all the potted petunias downtown here, but they have somebody coming every week to water everything because, you know, it's been so dry here this summer that
Yeah.
it's been a problem.
It's been really dry here too. I mean, that's all I can do is to encourage them to do a modicum of care. You know, it's like even at the garden center, you know, they would come in and they'd really like this hanging basket. And so, you know, I take the hanging basket off the shelf and I'm holding it for them. And they say, how often do I have to water that? And I say, well, I don't know. I said, probably once a day, once summer gets going, maybe twice a day when it gets really hot. And they say, oh, that's a lot of work. And I think I am not selling you this plant, you know, because it's just,
Well, yeah.
it's,
That's great.
you know, it's a living thing, you know, which a lot of people just don't, it doesn't make that connection.
Yeah.
You know, that it's a living thing.
Jude, you have your hand up.
I have a question about, do you terminate the plants at the end of the season when, if you're changing out for the same client? What do you do with those plants you're removing from the containers?
I compost them.
So there's
I
no
share them with,
there's
with
no
other
opportunity to
people.
reuse them, right? Right.
oh, no. No, I mean, I grew up in a grower family and plants are disposable. I mean, they are disposable. I have a hard time with the folks who, you know, worry about every little fleck on a leaf or every little brown spot or every, you know, they're just like, you know, helicopter plant parents. And they, you know, they just worry about everything, especially the houseplant people. Oh my gosh. And, you know, they try every kind of cure they can find on the internet, as opposed to actually, you know, seeing what maybe Washington State has to say about taking care of the insects on that plant, or what Purdue has to say, or whatever. You know, I mean, it's just, and then, you know, sometimes plants die. They're like people, you know, they have a lifespan and then they die. And so we appreciate them while they're here. We, you know, praise the good Lord for giving us good examples of what his, you know, plants are and everything. And, you know, you just kind of let it go.
Truly
you get
less
to
a
plant something new. You get to plant something new when a plant dies, you know.
truly laissez-faire there, you know, Jo Ellen. It's there's kind of there's a whole Zen spirit to your technique and your philosophy here. Other questions, other comments for Jo Ellen?
Well, I mentioned, I showed my worker here the beautiful pots you have pictured here. And I said, I want my pots at home here to look like this, Aaron. And he said, we don't have time for that BS. But I think we do have time for this, to do it that way, because they're very beautiful.
Well,
and I want mine to be look like that too.
I know, and it's experimenting. You know, I have to thank the growers for begonias. I mean, the breeding this and the hybridizing that's going on in begonias, they are just like tough as iron plants in shade, dry, wet, sun. I mean, they don't do wet too well, but I mean, they're definitely quite adaptable and go through benign neglect perfectly. And so I'm grateful for those.
You're not talking about the tuberous begonias, though. You're talking about the other type.
Oh gosh, no.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the, I don't know if they're a hybrid, like Big and Whopper and Bada Bing. I mean, they're bulkier. You know, we all grew up with the whole cocktail series, whiskey, gin, you know, little bedding begonias, you know, and they've just really done so much breeding on those that the plants are bulky and the flowers are showy. And, you know, the underside leaves have a little different color to them. The tops are green, but the undersides have little reds in them, more like a hardy begonia. Do you guys grow the begonia grandis there? Which we can grow here. It's, but they're just very good. And then I know that, you know, Proven Winners has a lot of plants out there, but I can tell you that they're not all winners. Some are better than others. And I've just sort of learned.
Okay.
I'm sorry, did somebody say something?
No, continue on, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's just some of them are definitely better than others. And, you know, you just kind of learn which ones are going to be able to take that site. You know, some are just, you know, like I said, the guy whose porch is one step above dark. It's like hard to find things. I mean, even house plants need a little light, you know, and so you just have to really kind of, you know, play around and see what works. And you guys talked about wind. I have two projects that have a real wind tunnel. One of them is at the state fair, and they're in small, like maybe 12-inch round containers about, you know, waist high. And where they're located, I mean, it's just like a tunnel, just like Boeing should set up a wind tunnel there, you know. And so we quit planting in those because you couldn't really put anything in there that was going to work. So we put in junipers, sort of the drapey junipers in there, and I'll stick some ornamental, you know, sticks in there, but even those get blown out. So, I mean, there's just, you have to kind of like just accept what's there and, you know, just kind of live with it.
Jo Ellen, thank you so very much for joining us here today.
Thank you.
There's so much to see and to learn here. And I want to encourage everybody to sign up for the blog, right? Visit the website. Because even though
that's the newsletter. The blog is open to the public, but the newsletter, people can sign up for the newsletter, and you can, you know, find my email. You can email me from my blog. I'm happy to, you know, answer any questions that you have or talk about anything. I've really enjoyed this, and there is a little bit of, you know, envy here for the kinds of things that you can grow that I can't grow. I told Kelly when I spoke out there in April that the first question somebody asked me was about a fuchsia. And, you know, we grow fuchsias here as an annual or a house plant. And I had walked around the garden with Deb Prinzing, Bellingham Garden there, and I noticed that there were like huge, you know, plantings of fuchsia. I had no idea they were a shrub. And so that was indeed the first question that somebody asked me was, you know, how to take care of this fuchsia shrub. And I had like no idea. I referred them to the garden. But I mean, it's just like you learn and you go to these different places. And we talked a little bit about the light. If you've ever been to Europe or, you know, like the Netherlands, and the light is just so different there than it is here. And then what you have also, that light is very different. And it just gives a whole different look to the plants in the environment.
And this, of course, I think is the richness of our sharing here today, is that, you know, even though our conditions are very, very different from where you're at, right? Sharing and talking about plants and those different experiences helps us all grow. It helps us explore different perspectives, you know, on some of the same issues. And so it's fascinating, right? You know, taking in, you know, thinking a little bit about how others in a very different environment and climate, you know, approach some of the same issues.
Yeah. Well, this has been a lot of fun, you guys. I hope you've enjoyed it and we've shared some knowledge.
So thanks much. That's for sure. Any final questions? Any final comments here for Jo Ellen? We'll let her go.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo Ellen. Very good. Okay, and thanks everyone here for your participation here. You know, I wanted to just make sure I've made the correction here on the slide here for Saturday, November 5th. That's our potluck. Saturday, November 5th is our potluck here. And we'll have more details coming out in the e-news and so forth as we get closer into the month. I'm going to go ahead go ahead and tie off the meeting here today, and go ahead and stop the recording.